So here we go. Hello, everyone, from wherever you are in the world today, and welcome to the HR Innovation and Future of Work Global Online Conference presented by Hacking HR. It's been an amazing event so far with over 10,000 people engaged in the conference who are learning from thought leaders around the world on just what the journey towards the future of work might look like. This is the Future of Recruitment panel. I am your moderator, and Ron Godier. I am the managing director of a tech-enabled recruitment process outsourcing company in Chicago called hirewerx. I am also a proud member of the Chicago chapter of Hacking HR. For those of you who have been watching the behind-the-scenes stuff that's been playing out here, you will see that there's a lot of things we have planned for you. You've already had a chance to view some of the some of our presenters for today. So a couple of quick housekeeping things. We are going to try to take questions from the audience as you guys watch. You can comment over in the chat section. We will do our absolute best to keep up with those, but please understand that sometimes these things lag behind just a little bit. What I'd like to do first is I'd like to introduce our panelist for today. She is the U.S. Assurance Talent Acquisition Leader for Pricewaterhouse and a financial literacy advocate for children at the Corpus Christi School in New York City. He is the founder of Workspace.io, a high-signal, zero-noise talent marketplace. He's also the curator of Recruiting Brainfood, which is an excellent newsletter and podcast. If you have not been involved with it in the past, I would suggest you check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Carmelina, Lalley, and Hung Lee. Guys, how are you today?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Great intro, Ron. Love to be here, man. I think it's a massive time lag. Okay. Oh dear. So Ron's popping in and out. Yeah. That's okay.
I'm back. I'm back. Don't worry. I'm just going to all day long. It's going to be one of those days. So where did I lose you guys? Did we get through anything that I said?
Yeah. Yes, we heard it all, and we just said hello.
Excellent. So hello, guys. So we have three basic topics that we're going to try to cover for today. Three basic areas: the AI, automation, and the future of recruitment. We're going to talk about how technology can help us eliminate bias. And we are also going to talk about how technology can help improve the interview process. So, Carm, I want to start with you in our first area here. PwC is a mature consulting organization. Walk me through how you have advised clients, both internal and external, about, am I here? Can you hear me or no?
Yes, we can. I can. Yes, we can.
Okay, good. It looks like it's lagging pretty bad.
Yeah.
Walk me through kind of how you talk to clients, internal and external, about the revolution in recruitment as it relates to AI and automation, and how that's going to impact their recruiting efforts.
Sure, Ron. So my role, I lead a team of about 70 recruiters nationwide that procures or acquires thousands of folks for the PwC assurance business. In addition to that, I work with our people and org consulting practice and consulting to clients on their talent acquisition strategies. So I'll frame my comments across those two worlds. What we do in-house, but also how we advise clients. So we've done some research on technology and recruitment and the place technology plays in recruitment. And in our research and in our experience, what we have found was technology certainly has a role. But I think what we think is very important, and what our research would say of candidates we've talked with, is that we have to keep humans in the center of it. And I know we've lost Ron again, but I'm going to keep going. So we have to keep humans in the center. So what are the moments that matter? We love that term. What are the moments that matter in a candidate experience such that technology wouldn't make sense, nor would it drive a positive candidate experience? But what are the moments that actually you can streamline, you can automate, that would create a seamless candidate experience? Things like interview scheduling, maybe some initial touch bases in terms of, or routine touch bases as to where a candidate is in the process, because candidates want transparency. So can we give them transparency through automation and technology? But I think it's
cool.
discerning the moments that matter, where humans must make interaction and where it's important to build relationships with candidates, and using technology in the places where you can streamline, automate, and create a seamless candidate experience.
Excellent. Hung, when you think about this, when you think about how technology is actually going to impact clients, people that you talk to, what are the things that come to your mind about things that companies should be looking at and focusing on as they begin to make this transformation towards a more automated future?
Well, you know, should is a really difficult word to think about, because are we talking should morally or should in terms of what the business bottom line is?
It kind of depends, right? It depends on the perception of the company, I guess.
Yeah, well, let me tell you where it's going to go. It's going to go on the bottom line. And the bottom line is going to be that companies are going to use technology to automate the hell out of every single part that they can. And they're going to reduce the amount of time and man hours it takes for a recruiter to get X number of people through the process. And as a result, they're going to cut costs. So I think if you look at the canonical example of this, it's probably Unilever, who have literally not done anything particularly interesting, I don't think. They've simply dropped a technology into a different part of the recruiting funnel. They've used async video interview on one side. They've used a sourcing platform on another. They've used psychometrics to do the psychometrics. Apparently, they saved 70,000 interview hours by doing that. Hired 8,000 people and got them through the process, and basically addressed what they called an overwhelming kind of applicant flow, 2 million applications per year. So here is a company that has basically used a lot of tooling to reduce the amount of time it takes to recruit the same number of people. And the bottom line is they've done it a lot cheaper, more efficiently, with less recruiters. So that is what most companies will do with technology.
You know, it's interesting because I think so many people are afraid of the technology, the advances, because they're worried about what's going to happen to them in their individual jobs and how those jobs might morph and change over time. There was one of the things that you and I talked about the other day, Hung, was how technologies can streamline process for recruiters, in a sense, making them more effective. And I often wonder where organizations should look for efficiencies. There are some obvious ones in terms of sourcing and scheduling and some of the scraping that you can do today. But from your perspective, and this is really for both of you, where should people look for efficiencies in their own practice, whether they're an individual standalone recruiter working a full desk, or they are leading a global team, and like you are in the case of you, Carm. Hung, what do you think about that?
Oh, I was hoping Carm would take the first shot at that.
Well, I think if you find yourself as a recruiter, and we all are recruiters, if you find yourself doing the same thing over and over again, routine tasks that aren't moments that matter, I think those are prime for automation. Those are prime for some sort of technology to do it for you. So I think those are the indicators for me when I'm looking at our team and when we're looking at our processes. Yeah,
there's a really good quote by a guy called Andrew Ng. I don't know whether you know him, but he's basically an AI kind of aficionado. But he said that essentially automation is going to happen where human beings are spending like a second or less in terms of a cognitive effort. So if you think about what recruiters do, a lot of the work that we do, cognitive work that we do, is repetitive stuff. When we're hunting around to book an interview time or an interview room or something, that doesn't take a genius to do it. It just takes time. A lot of sourcing. What is sourcing? You have your string, you're just going through a bunch of records. There's 10,000 records you're going to go through. It doesn't take a huge amount of genius to do that. It just takes time. So all of those things, I think, are where we're basically not being creative. That's definitely where we need to think, can we apply some technology to get this through the process? And to the point that Brandon Farrar mentioned there, thank you for your comment, by the way, sir. A lot of the bad experience that candidates get is due to recruiter inefficiency. It is not to do with lack of care, in my opinion. It's not to do with the trope of recruiters being lazy. That's not the case. Certainly not my experience being around recruiters for the last 20 years or so. It's simply inefficient how we have operated. We get overwhelmed by candidates. We get overwhelmed by information coming at us. We can't deal with it. And thankfully, I think technology is coming to help in some ways. So yeah, answer to your question, Ron, I think we're going to apply technology to low-level cognitive tasks that take up a bunch of our time.
And Sharif, your question here, do you think technology will replace recruiters by time? I don't. I really don't. I think there will always be a need for the human interaction. What do they say? You know, when you change jobs, that's a huge thing in your life. And there's lots of decision points that go into whether you're going to take a job, not take a job, go off and be independent, not be independent, join an organization for a project or not. And I think those are so nuanced that they require a relationship and conversations with other humans who can be that nuanced with you. But there are things on the outskirts, though, I think that can be automated, to Hung, the point you were talking about. And even if it takes a second or more, or doesn't take lots of cognitive or relationships nuanced type behavior.
And one of the interesting things, Hung, that you and I talked about the other day was the amount of noise that happens. And I think that's part of what human beings can actually have an impact on, is helping cut through that noise. I think that if you look at technology, one of the questions we have here is from Sharif, is do you think that technology will replace recruiters in time, meaning that tech allows you to, based on cognitive based behavior aptitude? I think there's always going to be a place for humans. I think that there are things that humans do very well, and there are things that machines do very well, right? And I think if we learn how to leverage those things appropriately, we can actually be a little more effective than we have been in the past. Brian Rose says, is anybody else having problems hearing me? Of course they are. I'm having problems hearing me. So Brian, I apologize. I'm sorry. I don't know what the issue is. If it gets too bad, I will step out of the way and just let you guys take it from here. So let's move on a little bit. So we've heard predictions. A lot of people talk about predictions in the future, and they talk a lot about well, it looks like I'm dropping out again.
No, you're still there, Ron, for us.
I don't think you can hear us. He's going to drop out soon.
Yeah, I know. I think it's something with his bandwidth or something.
He's going to go.
There he is.
What was he?
Yeah.
He was about to say something, and we could have gone with that. Hang on. There is a PDF.
Okay. I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on. I apologize, guys. One more shot, and then I'm probably going to step away and try to see if I can't figure this out for the back half of this. But let me ask you guys a quick question. So we've talked a lot about the future state of recruiting. You see people, futurists, who are focused, 20 years out, 30 years out. Let's talk about the next 10 years. A lot of experts say that the talent shortage that we see now is only going to increase over the next 10 years. And it seems to me that in addition to data and technology, that there are skills that people are going to need in order to be competitive, or in order to be effective as recruiters. What do you think the skill sets are, the soft skills that people should be acquiring and cultivating to improve their role as a recruiter in their organizations?
Carm, you want to give it? You want to take you? I didn't know if you wanted to start. I think, at a firm like PwC, we have so many talented professionals. We bring in so many talented professionals. But we also have talent professionals across the U.S. and the globe. So one of the things I like to that I've been thinking about is that the new talent acquisition is talent retention, and how can we as talent acquisition professionals help our human capital professionals, brethren, in internal mobility, really understanding the skill sets of those that are within our organization already and moving them, making their career, progressing their careers, moving them to different opportunities, upskilling them. PwC's made a huge commitment across the globe to upskill all of us in the areas of data literacy and other technologies. So I think it's really around how can we expand our roles to not just external talent acquisition, but also understand talent that's in the organization and moving that talent around.
You know what, Carm, I just want to drop it. I would have said exactly the same thing had I had the first shot at that question, because the main issue, and I'd say this to all of the folks listening to this show, actually, if you're in the recruiting game right now, it's absolutely essential that we expand our scope, yes. Because going back to the question we talked about earlier, we spend actually way too much time doing the stuff that will get automated. And we need to understand what that means for our jobs. It means that we need to expand beyond those types of activities. So I know, for instance, just writing the newsletter, for instance, recruitingbrainfood.com, if you haven't subscribed, by the way, you should do that. Like sourcing is the most popular thing, right? Every week, it's like hundreds of people. Oh, if I put a sourcing article in there, I guarantee you that's going to be the most clicked thing on that newsletter. And you know what? That kind of depresses me because I look at what sourcing really is, and it's an imminently automatable activity. It's basically human beings going into the internet, interrogating an inefficient system, and drawing out some information that leads to a candidate. That is basically stuff that a machine can do better than us. It is an automatable activity. We're interfacing. The only reason why we exist as sources or we develop these skills is because the system is inefficient. It doesn't work according to how it promises, but those systems will get more efficient over time. And with the addition of artificial intelligence, machine learning, those types of technologies, it'll make it exponentially faster. So we need to really pivot off sourcing, in my view. And as you say, Carm, we need to expand our remit, even if that means that we end up rubbing up a little bit with marketing on the front end before the funnel happens. Even if it means rubbing up a little bit with HR, you know, after the hire is made. We've got to battle with those functions to really own our part of the future. So absolutely essential that we do that, because we, like every other job out there, need to understand what technology is going to do to our value to the business.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, your question here around experience is a factor with, you know, and I think in today's day and age, we cannot fool ourselves with the labor, you know, with the labor market that we're in, with the unemployment rate as it is in the United States. We can't fool ourselves that we're going to find somebody with the perfect amount of experience that's going to hit 100% of our, you know, basic qualifications or even any of our qualifications. So I personally think, and part of my role is bringing in entry-level hires from different universities and colleges across the country, that we need to drive our hiring leaders and managers to look at potential. And I know there are some assessment tools out there that look at that, because we cannot just rely on getting the perfect experience on a resume. It's just, they're not going to be there for us.
Let me ask you guys something, because Hung, you talked about sourcing, you talked about that being a primary function, a primary driver in the business, and it being an inefficient system. And I would agree with all of that. I think that, you know, we've had questions about automating. What can you automate? How do you automate? And I think sourcing is ripe for that. But I also think that what we struggle with is not finding candidate data. It's not finding solutions or finding ways to connect with these people. It's how do we get them to engage with us? And I'd love to hear you guys' thought on what that means and how you think about engagement strategies as it relates to technology.
I'm happy to take this one first, Carm. So I think in some ways, so the last 10 years you can look at really is the beginning and end of sourcing, in my view. So 2010 to 2020, really when sourcing really tracked social data, and you know, we became good at figuring out that actually the digital exhaust that people were making could be used for recruitment purposes, and we don't understand that essentially what happened is we've made it easier to find people, but that then creates the problem of engagement, because as people get more easily discovered, the world gets more noisy for them and they start switching off. A big part of the reason why we created Workshape in the first place was because we recognized for the software engineering community, their world was completely snowed under. Their inbox was no use anymore because they just get hammered by recruiters messaging them all the time. And when you have that situation where people highly skilled in demand are basically white noising external messaging, like you do now to a phone call you don't recognize, right? We don't answer that. Why? Because you know it's a sales guy. In the same way, why does a developer answer or open an email from a person he doesn't recognize? He isn't. He knows it's going to be a recruiter. So these things cause a crisis for us in engagement. I'm of the view that the only way to solve that is not to get technically better at messaging, actually. There's most tools out there will tell you, hey, we're going to write you a better email, or we're going to do some sentiment analysis and figure out when's best to connect with this person, or they're going to help you create a cool, rich media video or something like that. These things will give you incremental returns, but they're not going to change the fundamental reason why this person doesn't want to speak to you. And that's because you are interrupting that person with a pitch. We need to completely rethink how that relationship starts. And we need to kind of reverse the flow, if you like. Recruiters are used to going out and knocking on the door and seeing whether this person can open in. Well, no, we need to find a way to pull them in. Talent attraction is the name of the game. We need to pull them towards us. Again, a good example is recruiting Brainfood, because I used to sell into the recruiter community, actually. So I was the guy knocking on the door. Carm, I probably sent you a few cold emails that you didn't open.
I think you probably have.
Sure, of course I have. You didn't open them, and rightly so. I was selling you some software. But instead I thought, you know what, that era is coming to an end. I need to find a way to provide value to the audience I care about and get them to opt into me. This is the post-CCPA, post-GDPR world, consent-driven communication. You have to get them to come to you. And that's what recruiting Brainfood is. I'd recommend people experiment with a similar type of approach, where you're creating kind of some gravitational pull, pulling them into the space that you own, and then you can message them, and guess what? They're prepared to open it.
Yeah, and in fact, at PwC, Hung, to your point, part of our research has been that we have to find a way to bring our culture to life. And the only way to do that, especially with adults, is for them to experience it. So what we've been doing is holding events around topics that make sense and that are valuable. And sure, we have recruiters milling about, but we also have thought leaders from PwC that are there that are providing information and guidance and answering questions of those in the audience. And if we get some folks interested in PwC jobs, great. And if we don't, it builds our brand and it gives, it fulfills our purpose in providing information and value to people outside of PwC.
There was
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Hung. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I love that, because ultimately it's starting the relationship in a neutral space.
That's right.
But one of the key, basic conversational theory, you can locate the first conversation in one of three places. You can talk about me. I can literally talk about me, kind of boring. This is what employer branding is all about. You literally talk about yourself and how cool your job is. You know what? Candidates don't give a damn. Or I can talk about you. And this is what sources do, which is, I found out your dog is called Fido. I'm going to drop Fido into email. And, you're going to find that cute. Maybe you will do. Maybe you'll find that creepy, actually. And you'll be offended by the fact that you've done all of this weird kind of a sleuthing around my background without my permission. The best way to start a conversation with someone you don't know is in a neutral space where both parties can enter it with equity and leave it with no prejudice. And that's kind of what you're doing with an event. You open events, you're not charging candidates to come in. I hope not. If someone comes in, doesn't like it,
we actually give them free food. There's free food. There's free connection.
Let's just go have a conversation. Let's get the humanity back into it. Because once you take the agenda away, once you take agenda-driven communications away, the humanity naturally comes back. And to your point, someone mentioned, what is the example of consent-driven communication? Basically, if you create this neutral space where people can enter and leave, what happens in there is usually consent driven.
We talk about this with our clients all the time, and it's interesting that you guys bring it up the way you did, Hung. It really resonated for me that there are, if you think about it this way, if I'm walking down the street and I walk up to a stranger and I have a widget in my hand and I walk up to them and I go, hey, do you want to buy this widget? They go, hey, weirdo, get away from me, right? Walk the other direction. They turn around and walk away. And there's a reason that they do that. It's that there's no relationship and there's nothing in there that says this is a safe space or a place where I can have an open and honest conversation. We talk about this in terms of recruitment, that every recruiter is really part of your recruitment marketing engine, and their messaging needs to be driven in the same way that any recruitment marketing program would be, to drive awareness, to drive engagement, and then drive conversion. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I was about to ask a qualifying question there.
Yeah, same. I wasn't sure what the question was.
There is no question. I'm all over the map. I can't get this thing to connect. I'm so frustrated. It's like,
no, I know. I'm sorry. That's tough.
So anyway, let's try to move on if we can to the next area. And everyone watching, I do apologize for the technical issues. So I want to talk a little bit about how technology and bias how technology can help us eliminate bias. And one of the today was a company called Tingai. They are a Swedish company that has built basically an interview robot that doesn't use any kind of picture or facial recognition, none of that, to actually interview candidates. And it's a fully automated physical robot with D&I software that's powered by 15 years of unbiased recruitment experience. Give me some thoughts on how you feel technology might help us do it, whether it's an anonymizer or whatever the case may be. Give us some thoughts around how you think technology will help us eliminate bias going forward. Carm, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So we've been on this journey, you know, in terms of looking at these different technologies. So a couple of thoughts that I have. One is, don't go it alone. So as recruiters, most recruiters, we've not come from that world. You know, I'm not an AI specialist. I was not a computer science major in college. So I think what we've done at PwC and what I think has worked is we've engaged specialists within PwC and outside PwC in this world so that we understand the technology. We also understand, we want to understand the algorithms that are built into these different technologies. You know, this whole concept of, you know, an organization in their white box. Is there transparency around the algorithm so we can see if there's a potential for bias? And again, that's not me evaluating it. We engage specialists. And that was one of the things we used. So I think it's important to understand how the algorithm works and whether it matches up to the culture of the organization that you're going to be putting it into. And I think there's also differences in the types of roles you would use it for. So would you use it for a role that was highly specialized, that had a lot of client-facing responsibilities versus maybe a more you know, a role where you have to hire in volume, things like that. So I think those are the considerations that we've thought
about. So yeah, let me just follow up with an answer on that thing, Com. I mean, I think most companies are on a journey here. So that's one of the things that we have to underline, because I think a lot of businesses tend to get like thrown under the bus sometimes. But I think we're trying. You know, I think the will is good. We're on a journey. This is all very new, and there's going to be mistakes made. Some of them catastrophic mistakes. The Amazon AI example, as an example. But those errors kind of need to be made in order for us to learn more. So I think where does it have a role to play? I think it does. I am actually not sure what precise role it will play in terms of debiasing. Again, Brandon put in a very good point. You know, it could be biased in terms of the data you feed it. It could be biased in terms of the sort of algorithms you design. Ultimately, it could be impossible to say here is a bias-free tool. It comes down to fundamentally what recruiting is. we are making a discriminatory decision. We're not just randomly hiring, although we could do if we wanted to, right? We could literally do a random, I'm doing a show about this tomorrow, open hiring, right? Literally hire the first person that shows up. That would be an unbiased way. But then you could still level the accusation to say, oh, is it really open? Because the first person turns up, you know what? This person has responsibilities. He or she could not turn up as a first person. So your criteria of first person is biased. So what is true, and I think it's quite worth us thinking about, is that biases could become just this universal accusation for anything, for an outcome that we don't like. There was a really interesting post written by a software engineer who got eliminated from a recruiting process. And she was upset, actually, because her experience wasn't taken into account, because for her, experience was the most important thing. But of course, she went through a process that did have technology, which says, you know what, we don't want experience because that is potentially biased. We're going to test you for your competencies. And then out of the test, she failed. So I think what we're kind of walking into now is that bias, it can become basically, it could be cited or invoked by the candidate to say, to dispute an outcome that we didn't like. And you know what? Potentially they have a point because we're still making a discriminatory decision at the end of the day. So what I'm saying in all of that is that I don't think technology is a bulletproof answer to the issue of bias.
You know, it's such a personal and interesting subject for everybody, right? Because it affects different people in different groups in different ways. I think that Brandon's point that you can't confirm that something is necessarily unbiased based on the technology, because so often when we're teaching a machine, we're teaching it what we think and what we know. But I think the advantage of systems like Tengai is that bias is usually made on these little minute-by-minute judgments that people have, and machines don't necessarily make those judgments. Do you see, and this is for either one of you, do you see a place where this would evolve to a point where it could be more common in companies and more common in the way people use technology?
Can I just address this real quick? Well, yes. I'm going to just assume that's a yes. So Tengai is a product I know. So Carm, you may not know, because it's quite a niche kind of Swedish product. But are you
guys done with me yet? Are you finished with having me?
No, it's fine.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I was just going to step in and just explain a bit of context. I think I should, because I know Tengai quite well. No commercial relationship. I just love what they do, because you know, when someone says, "Oh, we have an automated interviewer," you know, you expect some software, but no, these guys actually built an animatronic head that goes and interviews.
Yeah, it's like a head. It's like
literally,
this big,
it's a physical head.
It sits on the table.
It sits on the table. It's horrific. And when I first saw it,
I know it was kind of scary.
When I first saw it, I just thought, "Are you kidding me?" I had the first reaction that everyone else has. I think if I was walking through this and you told me I had to sit and have a conversation with this machine, I'd walk out straight away. It's an outrage. I need a human being here. Give me some respect. That's what I thought. First reaction. Everyone's reaction is the same. But then I sat down and had to listen to the founders, and they were saying, "Okay, Hung, I get it. This is the same reaction as everyone, but here's why we think it works." And they actually told me a really simple solution. The thing isn't that complicated. All it is a data collection device, and the candidate has the option of a human or a robot interviewer, depending on your choice. So number one, candidate has choice of options, which I think is one of the key ways in which we can debias things, is to give the individual an option of how they might be assessed. Secondly, they then explain why it does work without a huge amount of tech. And the reason why it does is because it does not screen out people that would otherwise be uncomfortable in a human-to-human interaction. And then the penny dropped for me. Then I realized, you know what, Hung, I'm a recruiter. Obviously, I'm pretty comfortable with human beings. You know, I talk for a living. That's basically all good for me. So I'm by default, my bias is, sure, I love an interview. But then I thought, hang on, what if I'm like really introverted? Or what if I have an anxiety going into an interview? What if I don't speak the language? What if I'm a former criminal? What if I'm a refugee in a new town? What if I'm disabled or differently abled? What if I can't hear properly? All of these types of things. I just thought, wow, I don't even think about these things, because Thank God I don't have these challenges, but other people might. And they might have continually had a terrible experience through the interview process, through all interview processes, because they were interacting with a human being.
And one of the things I read about is that candidates are more honest with the robot.
Absolutely true.
In their answers, because they don't feel like they're being judged.
Correct. And
it's so interesting. It's very interesting.
Let me tell you another example from a chatbot company that, again, I'm friends with, German business called JobPal. But they did some research and they came out with all of this counterintuitive information about what people ask a bot. And it turns out we prefer to ask questions to a bot. Why? Because there's no implications to the question. It could be, my bottom line is I need to know how much this pays, right? Don't waste my time. I need like $600,000, otherwise I'm not interested, right? But if I ask that to a human being, implication there, right? I'm thinking, oh, Hung's a bit of a mercenary. Is he a culture fit? No, he isn't. Get him out of there. But if I ask a bot, there's no judgment. It's literally a factual piece of information. Yes, Hung, the budget's there for 600 grand. So for lots of reasons, human beings might prefer to have a conversation with a non-human actor because there's no social exchange, there's no subtext, it should be more efficient, there's no chit chat, right? There's no need for us to get to know each other. No, I can go straight to the information, should be more efficient. So I think absolutely robots have a place to play in interviewing, no question.
I think it'll take a little time though too, right? I mean, like, think about this platform. Many years, it wasn't that long ago that we would have all been really uncomfortable in this kind of environment. But now it's common, you know. If I don't remember the last time I talked to somebody to order a pizza, you know, and that was, you know, that's how. So I think it'll take time, but I think to your point, there will have a place.
On that final point, before we move on, because I don't think Ron wants to do that, as we get used to more conversations with bots and what have you, and artificial intelligence as consumers, it'll slide into recruitment just as easy. It has to happen at the consumer level, society level. That is happening. We've all talked to Alexa or Siri today, haven't we? So once we start getting used to that type of dialogue, then yeah, these things are going to happen.
You know, it's interesting because machines aren't infallible, right? They're going to make decisions based on the things that we teach them. And I think that how we apply that technology, how we think about how it affects humans who are involved in these jobs will go a long way to providing technology, hopefully, that people end up feeling a little bit more uncomfortable with. Kind of a different question here. What are the things about technology right now in the market, the way it is and where it's headed, that scare you as leaders?
I'll talk from experience. I think we are adopting technology and we are trying to be smart with our decisions and adding different technologies to our stack. And it can be overwhelming to recruiters who may feel like they don't have the skills to interact with the technology or to interact with the data that's being produced that we're now expecting them to analyze and to drive insights from. So I worry about how fast it's moving, the ability for our recruiters to get up to speed or to feel confident about getting up to speed, and that all of these technologies in the stack ultimately make sense and talk to each other and actually don't slow us down and have the opposite effect of what we were trying to do in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I would say it's kind of tangentially related to that. I'm definitely an evangelist for tech. I think we definitely need to embrace it. My fear is that we don't embrace it enough, and we're not building the skills in order to do it properly. You know, we should be leading the implementation of a lot of this stuff. We shouldn't be bringing in a consultant or a systems integrator or whatever. That should be us doing this. And we don't do it because we don't have the skills. We're too locked down into, you know, the rigmarole of sourcing candidates, let's say, or scheduling interviews.
Hiring, you know, recs, right? Yeah. Filling recs.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Which I totally get, because a little bit of the problem with our function and our industry in general is that we're always maxed out. Like, you know, there's always one more call, there's always one more email. If there's 25 hours in the day to do the job, you can take 25 hours. What we have to do is to really be disciplined and say, you know what, I'm going to dedicate some time to figure this out. I'm going to carve out the time to upskill, because we can't allow the tech to run away with us. We have to be driving this car.
And we lost them again.
It's okay. I think I know. I actually have found the PDF, Carm, so I actually understand.
Oh, good. With the question.
I know what.
Here he is.
Here he is.
No, I didn't go anywhere. It keeps bound. I don't know what to do. I've tried 1,000 things. I'm afraid to touch anything because I'm afraid I'm just going to break it. So I'm trying to stay as far away from my computer as I possibly can.
Okay, so I think I finished that answer to that question about what scares us about tech.
Well, think about it this way. There's somebody sitting out there right now who either hasn't adopted tech or they're in an organization where they're a big ship, right? And it's hard to turn. It's hard to get that organization to go a particular direction. And their career might not have gotten to a place where they've been able to embrace it in the way that we do or the way other companies do. How do you calm the fears of that person that says, this is okay, Hung. It's okay for me to go ahead and do this because it's going to take me in places in my career that are going to be a benefit to me?
You know what? One of the key things that we can learn from the tech world is a curiosity, sense of experimentation, self-directed learning. These things are very prominent in the software development community. Recruiters, I think, intuitively are this way, but I can understand the situation if you've kind of grown up in a big corp where you had to follow the rules. Compliance is a big feature in your day-to-day. It might be difficult to break some of those things. I would just say, look, you've got to try. If you can't do it within the confines of that organization, try and do it outside of it, even in your own time. Thankfully, we've got an explosion of resources out there. This online summit is a great example of that, actually. There's a ton of communities out there. Go and join one of those. Please do go to an event. I mean, obviously, post-COVID-19, stay home, stay safe. But after that, go to one of these events if you can and interact with people that are in the same boat. I think, your ability to draw information from your network is also going to be a key skill for recruiters going forward. You'd be a better recruiter for having a strong recruiter network in the next sort of several years to come. So those are the things that I think a young recruiter stuck, as you say, in a big corporate business that might be a slow-moving whale. That's the message of hope I would give to that person, I would say.
Yeah, I would echo that, especially, somebody who's been in corporates all of their career. I think, most corporates are getting onto the, they're aware that they must change and they must evolve quickly. So I think it's a differentiator for you as a recruiter to lead instead of waiting to be led in this space. Information is power. Educate yourself. There's lots of resources. Hung's, this webcast, Hung's resources as well. I think there's a lot of things that somebody can do, and I think it's a differentiator nowadays.
We look at it when we talk to our clients, we talk about augmenting what they do right now, becoming an augmented recruiter, and how that is really the future of where people are going to go. I have a good friend who says, and I agree with him, that data and advances actually allow us to be more human in our interactions. Yeah. And I think that's what we try to focus our clients on, is moving away from that are things that companies struggle with, like sourcing and some of these other things, into being more brand ambassadors, understanding how to sell the corporation, how to sell the culture, how to really be an advocate for what the company has to offer. We've got about 15 minutes here. I want to move into the next section, and this is really about interview process. Now, Hung, you and I talked about this the other day about Robot Vera, which, for those of you who are not familiar, Robot Vera is an interview avatar robot that allows you to conduct interviews. And the idea behind it is that it begins to streamline the interviewing process. And I think that the challenge is some companies have processes that are so arduous that converting applicants to team members can be super challenging. So I want to talk about tech that can aid in these areas. So the overarching theme that I keep hearing is to make the process quick and painless. Hung, give me an example of a technology that you're aware of, or something that you're aware of that helps smooth out or streamline, decrease friction in the interview process itself.
I think firstly, there is kind of necessarily friction in the interview process. It's almost the reason why it's there, which is actually part of the problem, right? Because ultimately what we're trying to do is to gather enough information, pick up enough signals to be confident enough to say, that's my person. Is there another way of doing that? You know what? I think, yeah, probably there is. But then suddenly we're not talking recruitment funnel anymore. Don't worry, Ron.
It's almost too funny now. I don't even know. Like, I'll just pop in and out. I'll pop in over here. I'll pop in over there. It'll be great.
That's okay. I don't think I said anything of value anyway, so that's totally good. You're looking for like an example of a technology that might accelerate a recruiting process. I think you could look at something like an interview scheduler that would really help. You know, one of the main problems, I say this a lot because it's still a bugbear of mine. We're taking way too much time finding people's diaries. There's no reason why we're chasing people on email chains. You know, I think when Calendly came out, that was like a revelation for people, but it was still one-ended. You still had the other person have to hunt around. Nowadays, you can basically empower a bot to do that. And I think one of the most obvious applications of a basic artificial intelligence is someone who can find a spare spot in the calendar. So yeah, use an interview scheduler. There's tons of them out there. I think it's becoming mature tech.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably the most common one that I've seen being used a lot. We use one as well. I think another one piece of technology that we're very interested in exploring is one where we can have some scrapings out of all we get thousands, hundreds of thousands of applications as well. So can there be some sort of tool that scrapes the applications, and when a recruiter comes in that morning, they're served up the top one, top resumes they should look at because there's certain criteria, and and so they can spend their time, to your point, Ron, on being human rather than going through all those applicants in their rec.
It's one of the things that we talk about in terms of technology, and clients keep asking me about, is how do we address the concept of ghosting, right? Because it's happening to everybody. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think technology answers part of that, but I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this. To me, ghosting is a question of interest rather than a question of technology, and I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Do you mean, sorry, go ahead, Carm.
I think we have the same question. Candidate ghosting or employer ghosting the candidate?
So we set up an interview, candidate just disappears somewhere and falls out of the process. We have people saying it's a process issue, and I think it happens to be an interest issue or a brand issue. And I'd like to know if you guys think the same thing.
From my perspective, it absolutely is interest. Obviously there's something maybe that maybe we could have done to keep the candidate interest in this opportunity. I think we're also in a very unique economic environment where candidates have lots and lots and lots of choices. And unfortunately, experienced candidates, they may be getting opportunity to explore those choices at different times. So if a process moves faster and they're interested in that, they're going to be moving on with that versus their own process. So I think speed is important, but I think candidates have lots and lots of choices today.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that it's also a little bit of a misunderstanding of the psychology of people going through processes like this. We're not helped by the metaphors we use. We use hiring funnel. We talk about candidate pipelines. These are hydrological metaphors, as if candidates are water we can just push through a pipe. There's no sense at all by using those metaphors that the water ever stops or it reverses a path or it does anything else. It just has to be pushed through in a single direction on our call. well, actually, this is a human being on the other side with lots of different things going on in his or her life. They're going to make decisions. Actually, maybe the job process that they're involved in, that we're kind of dominating our mindscape, is actually a very small part of what they're thinking about right now. All of this, to your point, Stacey, yeah, it is about manners a little bit, but it's also about communication. I think if a good recruiter, one of the best things that they would be able to figure out is this person really into it? And can I get on top of it? What's your spider sense telling you? Those types of things, I think, very difficult for a tech to replicate. That's where maybe the human recruiter always have a huge amount of value. Wrong moment to drop out, Ron.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think nowadays too, it's so easy for candidates to make applications. It's so easy. We've made it so easy. So many times candidates will be applying to multiple jobs through multiple sites, and they won't even remember, what job they really applied to. So when you give them a call, they're like, "Who's this? What job?" So I think we're up against that too. We've made it almost harder to have, and I think also we need to educate candidates on the job. And if in fact there is no love between those two parties, then we should walk away in a good way. Like, we should be transparent in communication that this may not be the right match for us. I think transparency, it's recruiting 101, but that's what causes a lot of the ghosting, at least, that I've also seen.
Okay, I'd like to actually throw this back out to the audience, and we're going to have about 9 minutes here. If you have a question you'd like to get in with Hung or with Carm, please go ahead and put that up. But guys, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and like I haven't put you on the spot with this wonderful technological extravaganza that I've put on this afternoon. But if you're looking at the future of recruiting and you're thinking about, here's where I think it's going to go, I want you to be a futurist. Right now, I want you to put on that hat. 15 years from now, what will the role of a recruiter look like, and what role will that person play in the organization? I think that there are a lot of situations where HR is just now beginning to get a seat at the table, and I think that there are a lot of times when talent acquisition is misplaced, because in essence we are a salesperson inside the organization. So give me your sense of where you think this is going to be in the next 15 years.
I think in the future, a recruiter will not do anything without data. I think a recruiter will be so savvy at understanding talent pools, using research to advise their clients on where to get the best talent, how to get the best talent. They'll also, I love this concept of the augmented recruiter. I think a recruiter will have, like Iron Man, like all these different technologies on their body, really, but that will assist them in advising clients, advising hiring leaders on the best course of action around a certain need.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would absolutely agree with Carm on that. The 15 years, by the way, is a long, long way away. We're well into the realm of science fiction by then. If you look at the rate of change,
I know it's almost like what in the next 3 years, right? I mean,
absolutely. So if I could take the question though, and let's jump into the future. I think we're looking at a very different function. I don't think we're going to be that focused on acquisition of talent, so to speak. It's going to be more about providing access to talent. In other words, we're going to do far less permanent employment than we currently do as organizations. The organizational shape will change. We're going to have a lot smaller number of people on payroll and a lot larger audience that interface with that business that may not be on payroll. And what we've got to do as recruiters is, do we expand our scope to take into account those people, or do we stay small and just look after people that are on the payroll? I would hope that we have the ambition to expand scope and start being, if you like, a talent access advisor to the business. If the business needs to hire a perm person, great. If they need to access a gig platform to get that job done, even better. If they want to engage a third-party agency, brilliant. If they want to work with some AI machine, whatever, even better. Recruiters need to be in that to perform that role. So we've got some challenges ahead, but I think the opportunities are going to be fantastic for those of us who are brave enough to grasp it.
You know, it's interesting. Brandon talked about a question there that I think would be interesting to hear from the two of you. How do we incentivize recruiters to look in the already vast pool of candidates that applied for roles previously? In your experience, Carm, in an organization of the size of PwC, I would imagine you guys have a pretty significant system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you go about incentivizing those recruiters to go back? Because it's different when you're an agency recruiter, you're incentivized by relationships. Sometimes when you're an internal recruiter, you are incentivized by activity, right? And I want to make sure that that people have a sense of how you go about that there.
Yeah. So specifically, Brandon, you're asking about the vast pool of candidates that applied already. So we do have hundreds of thousands of candidates. And what I say to my team is we're sitting on a gold mine of talent of people that are in our ATS. And so I think we have to make it really easy for recruiters to access that talent in recs that they don't manage. So, you know, obviously in a large organization like PwC, you've got recruiters that are assigned to certain recs, to certain businesses, and they can get really siloed. So ensuring that our recruiters have the ability to understand the needs across different organizations, but also that they're served up candidates that meet the rec they're working on today, and we can use technology. And we are in the process of using technology to mine our ATS for those folks. The easier I think we make it for a recruiter, the more likely they will do that. And they're, you know, in our organization like PwC, we incentivize recruiters by the number of hires. So we want recruiters to make hires, recruiters want to make hires. And so if we make that process easier for them to make hires, they will go through those pools of talent.
Sure. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think technology is a friend here, because you know, one of the worst things that we've done is basically create these digital cabinets of candidates. Is literally a massive stockpile of data that we can't retrieve and we can't do anything with, and it becomes a tool that is horrible to use and difficult to force recruiters to do it. The recruiters aren't dumb. They know the candidate is in there, but they also know that it might be easier to put an ad out somewhere and get the same candidate from outside in. So how can we convert a lot of this data into usable material? I think the software that can help us do that. I think there's probably a segment of software vendor that can help us do this. You've got a pile of data. Can they convert that in some way? Maybe you can use CCPA compliance or GDPR compliance as an excuse to do that. Wash out that data, improve it, and then see whether you can convert this database maybe into some sort of community. If you can kind of get interactions going with all of the people that have previously shown interest in your business and your brand, if you can resuscitate those folks, then I think you've got a chance of building a community there. In which case, all of those people will become much more kind of closer to, there'll be a greater surface area for you to pick this person up, rather than them just being buried in you know, probably several 100,000 people, right? Historically in PwC, I mean, if you get 2 million apps a year, you're going to get a huge amount of data every single year coming through.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. Like, you know, we use Workday. We also use the CRM and with Smashfly, and so I think it's building a technology stack that's going to talk to each other, and that it's that where the data can be easily exportable. We are on a journey to that end. So I'm not going to say it's perfect, but at the same time, we know that we are sitting on this gold mine of talent. So we're really motivated to make it work.
And you can see that there are technologies out there, not just the ATSs that are coming out on the market that are applying things like AI to help move the funnel, move candidates through, but there are third-party tools out there that are sitting on top of that create a system of intelligence over the system of record that you have in your ATS. Guys, I want to thank you both very much for joining us. Again, my apologies for being in and out of this conversation all day, but I really, really enjoyed it. What I heard of it, I enjoyed. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time, Hung Lee and Carmelina, Lalley. And to those of you who are going to continue on, please join all the rest of the sessions here today at the HR and Global Innovation Conference. Guys, thank you very much. Have a great day, people. We hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.